Oi, what's the best game where you get to eat pie? What's the best game where you play a dead guy? Aye, you'll find out in VG247's podcast. Here, what's the best game where you swing from a rope? And what's the best game where you batter the Pope? Assassin's Creed 2. Like I said, you will find out in this your podcast. Hello and welcome to VG247's Best Games Ever podcast. We attempt to find the best game in a very specific and weird category that we've thought up to cause arguments amongst ourselves, because that's how we like to spend our time. So this week, in celebration of Starfield coming out, we have picked the topic of best Bethesda game that isn't a Bethesda game. So looking for games that have like some immutable quality of Bethesda games.
I think we can just let's just say we can read the topic however we want, Jim.
I was right on one there, and you interrupted me.
Oh, I don't enough of it.
All right, yeah, but Bethesda Studios games like Bethesda Studios games, but as Tom says, people can read the topic any way they want. And seeing as you've insisted, Tom, do you want to go first?
Yeah,
because you tell me that you've got a really good pick for this one.
This is different.
I have got a good pick. I do feel like you're probably going to disqualify it potentially. Well, so
I mean, if it's published by Bethesda, yeah.
Well, right. So I was looking at all the similar games, right? So it's it's an open world, sort of RPG with obviously lots of battle systems and magic or whatever. Lots of those games that aren't Bethesda games aren't that great. Really, that's the problem there, right? So you've got the stuff I don't know, is it Gothic? That was it, Gothic, the one that's in a
Gothic,
jail.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's
classic
okay.
Eurojank, innit?
And you've got a lot of those other ones the
Two
new
Worlds
ones.
2.
It was Two Worlds 2.
Yeah,
I remember those. And then stuff what's that new one? I want to say XL, but it probably wasn't called XL because that's the spreadsheet thing. There was a game that came out that sounded like XL, but wasn't XL. That just was not great. Typical, very janky, open world, lots of ambition. But
it was like a sci-fi Gothic.
Yeah,
I know the one you're on about. Can't remember what it's called.
But yeah, so all those games, I was no, can't pick any of these. And I thought, and this thing came to my mind. I was what if this works? I did some number crunching, looking at dates of various things, and it does work. So Bethesda obviously are at one point were just Bethesda, they just made their usual games and stuff, and then they acquired id, right? In 2009, something like that, right? 2010, I can't remember exactly, but one game that id was working on around that time was being published by EA, and that game was Rage. Right, Rage was an possibly EA Partners game. Yeah, okay. It's a actually pretty good, if not a bit dull at points, open world shooter. Looked amazing. Big deal was that it had it came on 3 discs on the Xbox 360 or something, and on that it only came on one Blu-ray. For the big deal for the PlayStation. Blu-ray. But through development, id was acquired by ZeniMax, which the publisher there is Bethesda SoftWorks. What's the actual publisher called? Bethesda something. They then took over publishing rights to publish Rage. So Rage, in my mind, isn't actually a Bethesda game. It is a id/EA game before they're acquired. Ended up being published by Bethesda. So that's where you're going to say it doesn't count. But I think it's the smart, clever answer to this question that isn't just here's another game that looks like any other Bethesda game. Plus, it's not that similar to the classic Bethesda game, right? A kind of shooter with actual good shooting. It's not something that Bethesda is known for.
Yeah.
It's an interesting choice. At the time, it was one of the Is it 2012?
I think it came out a bit before that, 2010 and 2011 or something like that.
It's around that time where good games actually came out sort of every 2 or 3 weeks. And it was very much in the... and how old was I around that time? I was sort of a middle sort of teenager at that time, and I was kind of getting pretentiously into games. And Rage was very much one of those ones where it was like, it's the storage studio. If you like games, then you're going to be really into Rage because it's by id Software, these massive developers. And it wasn't that great, though, was it?
It looked nice. It ran well.
No, it didn't. I thought that was the whole point.
It ran really well. It ran well. No, it ran well on Xbox at least. I mean, I wasn't playing on PlayStation because no one played on PS3 then. It was, multi-platform games, no chance on a PS3.
Yeah, only weirdos played multi-plats on PS3 back then.
I remember that being a game that was flooded in the retail channels, like it was massively overshipped, and you could get it for like £8.
Yes, that's a brilliant point.
Ages after it released. That's the main thing I remember about it.
Good value and a good game. There we go. Let's move on.
Do you know what? I really liked Rage. I really loved Rage. I thought the shooting felt fantastic. And they really like made a big deal about hitting 60 FPS on the old consoles, which was like very few games were doing that at the time. And it was a game that felt good first and foremost, but it was like it had a really I can definitely see that, like, had it not been acquired by Bethesda, you would still call it like its most Bethesda-like game. Definitely. I get it. All right. I'm not even going to disqualify it, Tom, on the basis that it was eventually published by Bethesda, because Bill Cliff stormed off.
He's got something.
He touched his hat. He touched the hat.
We talked about this before we started recording. There's a yellow thing.
Benny!
And what is the yellow thing? Is it a key? It's a key holder, isn't it? He's letting the cat out. No, it's a delivery. This is so professional.
What's in the bag?
I had to leave because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Obviously, you say that nobody played multiplats on the PS3.
They didn't.
I was one of those people. I only had a PS3. I never had an Xbox. That's
your problem, isn't it?
Well, yeah. So it's really funny that you obviously have a really different perception of Rage as a game than I do from playing on PS3, because, like Alex says, it's a brilliant point that it was like massively oversaturated, and it was the kind of game that, as I say, as a teenager, you could get for a £5 from Game, because there were tons of it. But yeah, I don't remember it running that well. And it was kind of interestingly overshadowed in the context of games at the time, because it was very compared to Borderlands or Borderlands 2 at the time.
Yeah.
And it had that similar sort of cel-shaded look. And then the same first-person style, but it was very... it was very much in the Gears of War, brown and green, mode.
That's the whole generation, right?
And then they completely flipped that on its head with Rage 2, where it was like the complete opposite of the pink and neon corporate mandated sort of punk look, right?
Yeah,
where it's this big studio, but it has to be edgy, so it's pink.
I really wanted to like Rage 2, but I've tried to get into it, and it's just not that compelling. It's perfectly decent, but it's like, I don't know, it just doesn't have the same hook that the original did. All right, okay, Tom, that's a really good pick, actually. I'm annoyed and surprised. All right, okay. Alex, what have you got for us? Is it Final Fantasy?
No, I mean, it's a very me pick. I did think about this one quite a lot, because I did sit back and I was thinking about all the Bethesda clones, your Kingdom Come Deliverance and things like that. But I ended up just focusing down on a game that I think is really interesting. So, and I think it's interesting because it came out right after Skyrim. Skyrim is sort of the all Bethesda game, and Skyrim is the game that a lot of the Bethesda clones looked at. But interestingly, this was a game that sort of was in development at the same time, but they clearly also looked heavily at Fallout 3 and Oblivion. As well as probably Fable, I would say, was another big influence on them. And it's got a lot of that Bethesda game energy, for better and for worse. And that game is Dragon's Dogma. So this came out 6 months after 6 months after Oblivion. So they were finished, basically, 6 months after Skyrim. So they were finished by the time Skyrim came out, so they couldn't adjust it due to Skyrim. But they talked a lot about Oblivion and Fallout in the interviews in the run-up to release, and they talked about how this was their attempt to make a game like Skyrim. And I actually feel like Dragon's Dogma, it wasn't that successful at launch, and then it gained a cult status over the years. And I actually think it probably would have been a bigger game had it not come out 6 months after Skyrim. If it had been flipped, if it had been the other way around, I think Dragon's Dogma would have been a much, much bigger game. But you think about it, it's sort of like the open world feels very Bethesda. The fact that this is a world where it's got the day-night cycle and all the NPCs sort of have their routines and things they do. You can only do certain things at certain times a day. All that feels very, very Elder Scrolls, very, very Bethesda Game Studios. I love just how some of the systems are slightly janky because they've got that stuff to work, but it doesn't quite work to the same in the same way or to the same level. So like they've got affinity and dating and mechanic and love mechanics almost, but they're not explicit. So it's not like you say to someone, I want you to be my companion. It actually bases it on who you interact with the most. So quite famously, a lot of people end up in with their lover as like this creepy little 4 foot tall like jester dude, because he just happens to be someone you interact with a lot for side quests. And so if you didn't interact with other characters a lot, just out of just out of how you were playing, you would get towards the end of the game where it would try to evoke that there were people who cared about you and loved you, and the person that it would use to represent that would be the creepy jester.
I love that. That is very Bethesda. Like it's a system working exactly as designed, but producing a ridiculous outcome.
Exactly, yeah. And Dragon's Dogma is full of a lot of stuff like that. And really, I guess you think about after Oblivion, Bethesda sort of thought, well, what can we? And they did Fallout, obviously, and then it was, what can we do with this? And I think what they decided to do was make everything they made there bigger and better and louder. And the end result was Skyrim. Dragon's Dogma, they made a world that was a similar sort of size to Oblivion, but they decided to make really engaging combat, and they decided to sort of go all in on that crazy multiversal, again, ahead of its time in a way, Dragon's Dogma, multiversal aspect of the world and the universe. I find that personally vastly more interesting than what Skyrim did. But yeah, it's got really big Bethesda energy. It was inspired quite heavily by Bethesda, and it is that vision of, because the other game I thought about picking for this was Breath of the Wild. Because that also is another developer filtering another series through the ideas that were expressed in the most popular games when it was being developed, and the leader of that was Skyrim, and then there's also Witcher and stuff. But I think Dragon's Dogma is actually weirdly a better example, and I think the end result is actually closer to the Bethesda games. And I think it's sort of interesting that we've now got Dragon's Dogma 2, and we don't know when it'll be out, but it'll probably be out within a relatively recent window to Starfield Mania, so it's sort of happening again, and it'll be really interesting to see what lessons they take and what sort of game they make versus what sort of game Starfield is, because it does seem again like they're going the same path where they're making bigger, more, and Dogma's probably going to be a bit more weird and esoteric, and I think it'll be interesting to compare the two. So yeah, Dragon's Dogma is totally a Bethesda-esque game. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Oh, God, I love Dragon's Dogma as well.
Is it, though?
You're right. Yeah, 100%.
The thing that struck me about Dragon's Dogma, and it's a game that I think I've played a few times as well, and it's a very good game, but kind of aesthetically and stylistically, the game that it kind of evokes more for me is Dark Souls, right? Within the kind of third-person perspective, like texturally and aesthetically, Dragon's Dogma looks very similar to Dark Souls. Yeah. It has that kind of dark fantasy, has the dragons.
The thing I'd say, though, is Dragon's Dogma was pitched and in deep development before Demon's Souls released. It was Oblivion that was the effective game on that. I think the reason they have that in common is because they are both Japanese games channeling Western medieval fantasy.
Yeah,
I think that's the Final Fantasy 16 is now also in this lineage.
Yeah, it is interesting how so you got two Japanese teams channeling Western fantasy and doing a sort of Western style game, and the end results are not a million miles from each other aesthetically. I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
But what I love about Dragon's Dogma. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's got that kind of Dark Souls kind of decaying world as well. Like everything's crumbling, everything's falling to bits, sort of like Last Days of the Empire sort of thing. But I love that it has the climbing a big guy and stabbing them mechanic from Shadow of the Colossus. It's got a bit of that in there as well. It's the stuff they did, the most innovative thing it did, the day and night cycle. When it's nighttime in Dragon's Dogma, it's fucking nighttime. Like you can't see
black.
shit.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's really, really cool.
And it's the first and I can't think of any other game that did it. It's the first and only game that's ever really done that, I think.
Yeah.
Where night is actually night. So, that's a great pick. I love Dragon's Dogma. Okay, all right, James. What have you got? Because you're like, apart from me, you're like the Bethesda guy, right?
Well, I think I've done goofed here because I think we were in for another exciting edition of you've all played those two good games, and then I've sworn in here with a game that I like PSP and nobody else has played. No, it's not a PSP game.
It's the unreleased PSP Oblivion, isn't it?
It's that would have been a funny one. Anyway, a game that I can't believe that we've not talked about already, because I've taken it in a slightly different direction. That when we're talking about Bethesda games that aren't Bethesda games, another pretty obvious route to take that down is Obsidian Entertainment, right? Developer of Fallout New Vegas.
Yeah.
And they've got loads of other sort of Fallout likes.
I thought about Alpha Protocol. But it's more of a BioWare game than a Bethesda game.
Exactly, but the really obvious one there is a kind of like, I suppose, like a proto Starfield in a way, like The Outer Worlds. A Bethesda, like it's very similar in the structure of the companion quests, the world, the exploration, all of that sort of stuff. But in terms of specifically for this topic, I think that it's almost backwards from the Bethesda mold. That with Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 and Oblivion and Skyrim, it's all very much the really great stuff is about the exploration and the side quests and the companions and all that sort of stuff. And famously, particularly in stuff like Fallout 3, the main quest is sort of ancillary to that, and it kind of gets in the way, and you're not really driven by that. Fallout New Vegas is very different to that in that it's like much more about these multi-layered different choices that you can take within the main quest, and The Outer Worlds is very similar to that in that the action is very driven by these different paths that you can take on the main quest, which I don't think makes it like a very perfect fit for being like the best Bethesda game that isn't a Bethesda game, because it's backwards. So I didn't pick that one. Screw that one. And friendship ended with The Outer Worlds. I don't want to do that one. So what? I
mean, they did explicitly model it after Fallout. Like it was. Have you seen the Obsidian documentaries that they're publishing? It's like a 5-part documentary on their YouTube channel. It's really good. But when they get to Outer World, they literally say like, "Yeah, we just wanted to do our own version of Fallout."
I mean, fair enough.
And it's great. And I think it was very successful. And one of the most Bethesda-y things about that game is in my opinion, is the DLC. And that's a huge Bethesda thing, that the DLC is always brilliant, and particularly the Murder on Eridanus DLC for The Outer Worlds is fantastic, and I'd encourage everybody to play that, because it's basically what if Agatha Christie but in space. As successful as The Outer Worlds is, it falls down slightly in that it is a smaller scope of game to the bigger budget releases of Skyrim, for example, and all of that sort of stuff. So I've chosen a different Obsidian Entertainment game, which I think, I can't remember if I just said this to Jim or I said this to everybody, would also be a really good choice for best game nobody's played, because I think this is one of the best games of 2022, and I really enjoyed it when I played it. But it's Grounded, which is the survival game, and lest I lose the podcast based on that sentence alone, even though it is in the same mold as Minecraft and Rust and Conan Exiles and all that bullshit. Grounded is this really interesting expression of those intense and explorative survival mechanics, where you're breaking down materials, you're exploring for resources, you're building up equipment, you're fighting these difficult creatures, but with that really interesting handcrafted Obsidian narrative driving the impetus of all of that stuff. And that is what makes it really, I think, compelling compared to a lot of survival games. That it to me, it's almost like one of those situations where it's like, it's a survival game if you don't like survival games. It has all of that. It has a taste of all of that really intense and arresting survival gameplay, like you're saying about day and night cycles in Dragon's Dogma. Grounded is very, very similar. That it has a day and night cycle, and all the stuff in it goes hog wild at night, and so it's an extremely kind of dangerous thing, and you have to really make concessions for that sort of stuff. But if you haven't played it, it's a 90s revival styled Honey, I Shrunk the Kids kind of thing. So you play as like a teenager that's been shrunk down to the size of the bug, and you're lost in your own back garden kind of thing. And the overarching narrative behind it is that you're trying to get big again, and you are exploring the back garden to uncover the mysteries of the kind of secret tech that have made you into a tiny little Rick Moranis little thing. Even though it's in a slightly different genre, it has a lot of the hallmarks of a Bethesda-like experience. Like the main scientist that you're kind of following in the footsteps of is played by Zachary Levi of Shazam. Is that the right one?
Yeah.
Shazam. He's in Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
He's recently gone off the deep end a bit.
Oh, what? No way.
Yeah.
Disaster.
Yeah.
I suppose when you look like that, you're probably a bit full of yourself, aren't you? But he's actually extremely good in this. He's obviously a good actor, and he's very, very good in this. But I think that's a really big thing of Bethesda games. Like, they always have this big name actor that they hook the story around. You've got Sean Bean, Matthew Perry, Ron Perlman, all of these people that are always like at the center of this really big name actor that is kind of carries the narrative. One of the main characters that you're interacting with a lot is a burger flipping robot that's been reprogrammed into the chief science officer called Burgle. Love a bit of Burgle. He's brilliant. That's obviously very Fallout-esque, that you're dealing with these kind of retro future repurposed tech which has this charming personality, and that's very Bethesda-like. In it has this really great gameplay loop of pooling resources, trying to fight the different bugs, and obviously because you're the size of a bug, you're fighting huge ladybugs. You have to make a spear out of crow's feet, like the talons that fallen off crows and stuff, and poke a big stink bug with it and hope that you don't die. And you're fighting spiders, and the spiders are really terrifying and awful, similar to the
spiders are awful. The spiders are so bad they had to put in an acrophobia mode. That reminds me very much of like death claws and stuff. That difficulty of these huge kind of scary beasts that are hunting you. That is very, very Fallout-esque. The reason that it isn't crap like Conan Exiles or something like that is because it has this Obsidian story, and it has side quests, and you're searching with this thing, and it has it's an almost kind of Assassin's Creed like juxtaposition of the incongruous sci-fi that you have, like the 90s revival kind of stuff, and then you have the sort of futuristic tech, and it is a really interesting and incredible world to explore, and I would encourage everybody to play it because it is very, very good.
I've got to jump in because I've got to leave to do more important work, but I've got to say before Jim sums up, right? So I like this choice, James, right? It's a bit of a stretch, isn't it? It's like, what if Bethesda made a survival game? Which they're not known for survival games, are they?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like this is the game that Fallout 76 should have been.
Yeah, that's another leap. But Alex chose I've forgotten what it was.
Dragon's Dogma.
One of the greatest games of all time.
Dragon's Dogma may well be good, but I found the opening few hours the most tedious thing I've ever played in my life.
It's very hard to get into, isn't it?
So I think on the fact that most people
that's also very Bethesda, though. Usually Bethesda games, you're going through dungeons, especially in that period of time. You're going through dungeons punching rats.
There's a lot of like terrible, like you're not very powerful. You don't know what you're doing. You haven't got good weapons or anything. It's just like, this is just. I was running around this tower for ages, just like, what is going on? This is not fun at all. There's doors I need opening with levers. Couldn't care less. I got through, and all I'd done was like, I don't think I got anything for it. And then you go back to the camp to talk to someone, and it's like, do you want to make this person your special pawn or something? I don't know. I didn't like it, is the answer. And I spent actual money on that game. Didn't just get sent it, I spent actual money on it. And as everyone said, it was so good. Did not like it at all. At least James's game is a good game. I'd give it that. But it isn't very Bethesda. My game actually is a Bethesda game, but wasn't a Bethesda game.
Yeah.
So I win. I've got to go. You can talk about this amongst yourselves.
I think that both of those, both Rage and Dragon's Dogma, they don't quite have the character-tuple element. You're generally going to leave. He's going to drop my drop.
The thing about Tom is that he does actually need to go.
Just figuring out how to leave.
All right.
Let's see what happens.
See you later, Tom.
That's the first rage quit we've had from the podcast.
Are we actually going to get his recording? I don't know. This has never happened before. This is a new thing.
Happened.
All right. Well, let's move to the summing up phase, just in case this whole thing is broken. All right. Okay. So Tom's pick, Rage. I love Rage. I think it's a very unfairly maligned and misunderstood game, and I really liked it. I really liked what it was doing. But it, as Tom himself pointed out, it is literally a Bethesda game. Bethesda published it.
I don't quite get what. Yeah, I feel like he stretched the topic.
Yeah,
the breaking point.
I think we can. At this point in the thing, I've got to just find stupid reasons to disqualify people because everyone picks good stuff. But Rage is a great game, but literally Bethesda published. So even though the circumstances of that aren't quite straightforward, you can't really say it's not a Bethesda game when.
I want to add one more thing about Dragon's Dogma, by the way. They were so determined to be Bethesda-esque that the soundtrack is partially composed by a great list of Capcom's in-house composers, Ray Kondo, Tadayoshi Makino, etc. But they also got Einon Zur, who did Fallout, and I assume the only reason they didn't get Jeremy Saul is because when this game was in production, he was working on Skyrim.
Interesting.
Otherwise, they would have poached him. I've played a bit of Grounded. I played it in early access. I think it's really, really good at what it does. I think it is a bit of a stretch, James. I think Tom's right about that.
How is it a stretch?
Because it's not really like it is first and foremost a survival game. It does have that thread, and that it does have that. I mean, I remember you made a video about. We made a video for it being your game of the year last year.
Yeah,
and you made the point in that it's much better than other survival games because it has that thread pulling you through, and it doesn't feel so meandering and aimless, which is a really great point. But I reckon it is closer to Rust than it is to Skyrim, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it has an aesthetic similarity in that it's from a first-person perspective, and you're interacting with combat and the world in a very similar way to as you would if you were playing a melee character in Fallout or Skyrim or Oblivion or whatever. I think the way they interact with the characters that you do meet in the game is also very Fallout-esque and very Bethesda-esque. The sort of warped Americana that's also very integral to a lot of Bethesda stuff, because this is like a kind of 90s Fresh Prince of Bel-Air kind of thing. It has a lot of sodas and products and radical skateboards and all of that sort of stuff, and you find throughout the world these like adverts for stuff and it's kind of similar to Control, when they have those infomercial stuff. And it has that aspect of like this twisted Americana that has that's playing on nostalgia within this kind of incongruous sort of sci-fi context, which I think is very Bethesda, and it underpins all of it, but it actually has a compelling survival loop to it, which makes it different to Fallout 76 in that they tried to just port over the normal one without any of the good bits.
I see this, but it's just not as much of a Bethesda-like as Dragon's Dogma.
But it's not a Bethesda game. But where is that kind of kooky conversational aspect within Dragon's Dogma? I don't think because the pawns don't talk, they're not characters, right?
Pawns don't talk, but the NPCs talk. It gives us the Masterworks all you can't go wrong.
Yeah, I was about to say Masterworks all you can't go wrong. You got the guy who does the weapons, and he says that.
But that's like Resident Evil, isn't it? That's always been.
Oh, there's a proper dialogue system in.
Yeah, there is a dialogue system. And like I say, you end up with weird stuff like dating the little gremlin jester.
Yeah. This the cat's back.
I'm like watching the door because I'm about to have a baby burst through the door in a minute.
The cat's back to console you, James. I'm afraid.
Do we want the cat on camera? There was a comment the other week that said more cats on camera. Shall I go get him?
Yeah, go and get him. Yeah. I have to. Yeah, I've got to pick Dragon's Dogma because I think it is. I'll wait till he's back. There he is. There's Benny. Beautiful little man. Come here. You are. We're getting some dog representation on as well. Oh, there we go. There's Charlie.
There he is.
Some dog representation on the podcast. Finally.
He's just turned his back. He's looking out the window. Oh no! Here we go.
So James, you've made a wonderful case for Grounded, but I'm going to go with Dragon's Dogma because it's just. Yes. It is the most. If you have to look at it from the perspective of this is Capcom's. This is the most Capcom expression of the Skyrim ideal.
100%
possible. Like, you know, if you literally said, "Oh, what would Skyrim be like if Capcom made it?" It's Dragon's Dogma, and I think that's the perfect expression of this topic. But I do take your point about Grounded. It is a lot like the worst Bethesda game.
It's what if the worst Bethesda game was good?
All right, okay. We're going to have to leave it there. Tom's already... I don't even know if we're getting Tom's recording. He might
This might be a lost episode that we've just lost there.
I mean, it happened the other week and like a few months ago, and we lost like Connor and Tom's recordings halfway through, and half the episode just me and Alex talking amongst ourselves. So yeah, all right, okay. Well, thank you very much for listening. Please leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice, etc., etc. Don't know what the topic is next week. Probably something else vaguely space related, because by the time this goes out, we should be very much on top of Starfield.
So something to do with Germany, because me and Dom will be in Germany for Gamescom.
All right, okay. What's the best game where you can eat a sausage? There we go.
I've got a good one for that.
All right, okay. I mean Skyrim. All right. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.